Good morning. This is Talking Devils, your favourite Manchester United podcast. I'm Wayne Barton, joined by Manchester United legend Paul Parker. We were going to discuss Manchester United's 1-1 draw at Leeds yesterday. Things have taken a turn in the last few minutes. I think we all suspected that it might have been imminent that Ruben Amorim would lose his job as Manchester United manager. It has been confirmed this morning. The club have put out a statement literally in the last 5 minutes saying, I'll read this word for word. Ruben Amorim has departed his role as head coach of Manchester United. Ruben was appointed in November 2024 and led the team to a UEFA Europa League final in Bilbao in May. With Manchester United sitting sixth in the Premier League table, the club's leadership has reluctantly made the decision that it is the right time to make a change. This will give the team the best opportunity of the highest possible Premier League finish. The club would like to thank Ruben for his contribution to the club and wishes him well for the future. Darren Fletcher will take charge of the team against Burnley on Wednesday. That's the club's official statement. David Ornstein with The Athletic said on Darren Fletcher, his first game would be away at Burnley with a permanent appointment likely to wait until the summer. So United are in that same old boat yet again. Before we get into all that, good morning, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, Wayne. Fine.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Yeah. Was it a good New Year celebration for yourself?
As you get older, Wayne, you just want less and less, don't you? I think.
Yeah, stay in.
Referring to New Year's Eve, anyway.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. Do you know, exactly the same. Stayed in. I think I've been out twice on New Year's Eves in the 21st century, and I was quite glad to have a fresh head on January the 1st. Quite glad to have one this morning as well because there's a lot to unpack. Paul, United drew 1-1 at Leeds yesterday, and I think it's fair to say, overall, we're not going to disguise this. We're talking about results and performances, because that's what's told for Ruben Amorim. But I think maybe it's not on the back of what happened at Leeds yesterday, or even what happened against Wolves. I think it's what he's come out and said in the last few days in the press conferences, where he's really put himself under pressure and thrown certain people under the bus. There was a line in yesterday's thing where he's basically saying the sporting director has to do his job, where he's referencing Jason Wilcox, and I think that looks like the line that's done for him. Even though I think in isolation, I don't think it's that bad a thing to say. I just think on top of everything else that was said. So your brief, I'm going to run through some of the quotes and everything that he said in recent days. But before we go to that, your reaction to this news. So we're obviously breaking this in the last 15 minutes. So people listening back to this is instant reaction to the news. What have you made of this? Do you think it was inevitable that it was going to happen? Are you surprised it's happened this quickly? Because it seems to have developed in a very short space of time. That it was
I think it has. Yeah, it has developed in a short space of time. Am I surprised? I'm going to say no. Did I want him gone? The answer to that was no. And the reason behind that, I just didn't want United becoming like a Chelsea in a way. And if we talk about keeping it within these shores, being a Chelsea in the fact of just constantly changing managers. What's Chelsea's average? It works out like 15 managers in 15 years for Chelsea. That's how it worked. That's how it's worked out. So it tells you where they are, and you look where they still are now, and it hasn't made much difference. And in a way, it doesn't. Wherever we are, and football has changed immensely. But the one thing you do need someone at the helm who is allowed to manage. It's as simple as that. A football club is nothing without a manager.
Yeah.
And I know a manager who said that, and I practically believe every word he says, and so I'm taking that as a fact. And it is proving that football now is football teams are not run by a football manager, and that's one of the reasons why the game is going that way. Why we're not seeing the quality of football that we'd love to see. We want to see, which good people are paying fortunes for. As I've said it before. If you was in a theatre and the show was poor, you could go and knock on the door and ask for your money back. People would demand their money back for a bad show. if the actors weren't playing their parts properly. So I'm disappointed that he's gone, but I understand why he's gone. There wasn't an improvement in the team, nothing gradual. Individuals weren't improving, and be honest, given this league, how it is this season, and it's relatively bad. But every time they had an opportunity to make a breakthrough, they never took it. And if it happens once or twice, you think, oh, but 6 times, maybe 7 times now, when they've had an opportunity to go for top, just to get in the top 4, and there's no guarantee they was ever going to stay there. But still, they never done it. So it told you something of the way the team was going. Now, is it down to him? Some of it is, but as we know now, a lot of it is down to the players, because some of them have been there too long. It's absolutely ridiculous when you look at Maguire and Luke Shaw, to name but 2. The amount of managers they've had, being players of Manchester United. So we're going to have to go through the whole process again of a manager coming in, and we're going to maybe just see a Manchester United starting 11 with a new manager, with Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire in, and it'd be interested how quick Harry Maguire comes back now as a new manager.
And Diogo Dalot as well, who was at fault yesterday. I thought a lot of criticism gone to Aiden Evan, but I thought Dalot just messing around with the ball. We'll get to the game. Obviously, we'll talk about the game in a bit, but there's a lot to get through here. So I'll just come through the comments very quickly. Tony on our tactics show every week. How are you doing, Tony? He says, woof, the first well-planned thing from Amorim in his 14 months. Ouch. Lee Griffin, who will be the interim? Who would United go for long term? Lee, I think it's already said Darren Fletcher's going to take charge of the team on Wednesday. I don't know if that means he's the interim to the end of the season. But, my opinion counts for very little, of course. But my opinion, I wouldn't be disappointed to see Ollie back. I don't think it will happen. We'll see. So interims can be a mixed bag. Tony said Wilcox and Broader should also be leaving the club. His appointment was their appointment. Yeah, there's a big conflict over the appointment with Dan Ashworth, wasn't there? And Ashworth left it. And a lot of talk in the last few days about Wilcox and Amorim being on opposing side of the 3-man system. Lee says, does this mean Bruno goes now? Don't know. We'll talk about that. Amorim gone, says only wavy bowler. If I pronounce that right, used to pray for times like these. Well, I don't think I'm with you on that, but I still think it's a sad time whenever United sack a manager or lose a manager and have to restart again. Like Paul was saying, I'll just drop Matt's comment, I'll come to it in a second, but as you were saying earlier, Paul, there's this thing about it. I hate this constant change at a club, and I hate this idea of like starting again. And I was saying way back when we appointed him that it's such a diversion from the change of system that in the way that we were changing the system, that you're going to have to invest so much money, you have to oversee that turnover, and we didn't have the money, so we didn't have the money to support the turnover of the system, and there was the worry that you're going to be left with players who wouldn't fit one. Well, I don't think we've got that worry, because I think some of the better players that we've got are those players that have been brought in, so I'm not that worried about that. But we've basically been sat with a finger on the pause button for 14 months. Then that project 2028, you've done nothing to accelerate anything. As Paul was saying, the only thing that we've got to take from this is some good away performances and some good away wins, but that's not enough. We talked about Erik ten Hag, and why he stayed for as long as he did was because he had a stay of execution. He had 2 trophy wins, and that gave him credit in the bank. That was a statement that was used, and Ruben Amorim had none of that from day one, apart from the hope that you have got to invest more time. And that's why on this podcast, Dave went very early and said he wasn't sure about the manager. And I'm sure that you and I, off record, have talked about our concerns about it. But, when you talk about it, it's kind of like, well, we were still supporting him. I'll always be in that position. But I lost conviction in that. And a large part of that was down to the fact that we changed system. And there's never a track record of that working well at United or in the Premier League. It was such a massive risk to take. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a risk. I just think it was so away from United's identity that it had to click immediately. You needed to see more evidence of change early on, and no one seemed to be buying into what the manager was doing. A couple of comments. Matt says, it's wild to me that they're sacking for something other than performances. Now, this is what we're going to get onto in a second. That almost concerns me more than anything. Having backed him in so much, having gone into bat for him, despite being one of the very worst managers at the club, the straw that breaks the camel's back is a comment about a job title. Seems almost petty, given what they did back him through. SJ says, we don't want Southgate. Kim, good morning, Kim. Hope you're doing well. She says, I hope there's a plan behind this. It feels like it might be a knee-jerk reaction to things going on behind the scenes. Will we just be stuck with a manager who's available rather than someone who can genuinely move the club forward? JS says, morning, never a dull day at our club. Yeah. Okay, so Paul, I'm going to read out some of the recent statements. So I think it was Christmas Eve, wasn't it, where he said something like, we can play a different way to take more quality from these players. I have the feeling that if we have to play a perfect 3-4-3, we need to spend a lot of money and need time. I'm starting to understand that is not going to happen, so maybe I have to adapt. That was his reference to changing formations. And then Jamie Jackson got in before the Leeds game, and he collared him on the question, and he wouldn't let it drop. He said, if you're starting to understand why you need a lot of top players to play this system, why didn't you realise that when you first came into the club? Amorim said, I don't want to talk about it, I just want to focus on the Leeds game. Jamie said, do you regret saying it? Amorim said, no, but I don't want to talk about it. So Jamie pushed him again and said, I'm going to try again. It seems mystifying why you would say a year in that you've only just realised you wouldn't be able to get enough top players. Has something changed with regards to what you were told or what Jason Wilcox said to you? And he said, I don't want to talk about that. You are very smart. So, and it looked like a backhanded comment to Jamie Jackson. I'm not a big fan of the way that Jamie did that, but he's a journalist doing his job, and he probed, and he got the reaction that he wanted, and it did escalate things. In the reaction to yesterday's draw, Amorim came out a few times, and he said this, like you said earlier, Paul, about manager and coach. Like United need a manager, and it's true. They need someone that oversees that entire overarching philosophy. I believe that. Some people might say that that's redundant these days. I think United's too big an institution to have too many cooks. You know what I mean? You said about Sir Alex. Not everyone can come in and be a domineering force like Sir Alex, but it needs to be the manager's philosophy that runs. You can't have different philosophies, or contrasting ones at least. You can't have conflicting ones. Amorim said, I noticed that you received selective information about everything. This is in reaction to the Leeds draw yesterday. I came here to be the manager of Manchester United, not to be the coach. That is clear. I know my name is not Tuchel. It's not Conte. It's not Mourinho. But I'm the manager of Manchester United. And it's going to be like this for 18 months, more 18 hours, when the board decides to change. So that was my point. I want to finish with that. I'm not going to quit. I will do my job until some other guy is here to replace me. He also said something about the transfer window. It's not going to change. We've got no conversation to have any change in the squad. And we'll get to the transfers in a moment. But that managerial point there is an interesting one. And it seemed from that moment, Paul, that it was going to be a change was coming imminently, because he said so many times in the past, I've offered to walk. And now he's saying, I'm not going to quit. That's a massive turnaround from that. So you knew he was a dead man walking at that point. Is it, I mean, he did sort of talk himself into a corner there, like, and it was, do you feel like it is, like everyone's saying this morning, down to the comments that he's made rather than the results and the overall, obviously, results and performances over the last couple of weeks? So it seems to be more about the way that he's talking.
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes to his comments, because I think the kind of people who are behind football teams now, they don't want that. They want the person who they see as employed by them to actually, really in theory, not talk about them unless they're saying anything positive, like they're virtually saying thank you and we're losing games and it's all my fault. It's nothing to do with those people who are giving me these players. That's the bit of it, is that everyone has to understand that majority of managers, and I talk about Premier League, I mean, it goes down to the Championship, depending how financially, what kind of money your club's got, is that the football clubs now are being run by the owners of the club, and their people run the club for them. So it's virtually micromanaging now. That manager doesn't have a lot of say in what goes on. He's having to work with what he's got. So when he wins games, it's virtually he's going to have to be saying within his head when he's with them, thank you for giving me these players. And when he's losing games, he's going to have to be saying virtually, sorry that I can't get them playing the way you want me to.
Yeah,
I mean that's the way it is. So it's difficult. It's a really difficult thing now to be that, and you're virtually going into a job, and you are a coach, and you're working with what's throwing on the training ground here. They go and get the players because they're using all analysis now to bring players in, where before it was 2 or 3 people you trusted who had people who worked under them, and they'd throw names at you, and then virtually you'd go and find out every single thing about them. What are they like in the away games at certain times of the year? Can they deal with certain kinds of weather? What's their social life like? What happens when things are going wrong? How do they react to when things ain't going right in their team? Are they good enough when things aren't going well, or do they go missing? What about when things are going well? How do they respond? And what about playing with top players? Can they play with will they improve playing with top players? All those little things which I don't think computers and all these people doing it will know about. If you saw these people who sit at games behind laptops, I think a lot of people would understand where I'm going, because they wouldn't know a footballer if one head was juggling the ball, to be perfectly, it's dead in front of them. Unless it's on computer, they haven't got a clue. So that's what you're having to deal with. But as we go on, 10, 20 years' time, managers will succumb to this kind of way of doing things and believe it's the way it's always been. That Stanley Matthews was found on a computer. So it's very, very difficult now for managers to do what they want to do, to have a say. You can't manage, as much as he said there, he's there to manage Manchester United. He couldn't, because the players will go above him to go somewhere else if things ain't going right. So even at a big club like Manchester United, we've seen it with what's happened with Chelsea. He's said his little bit as well, and that's what he was having to work under. In the end, he cracked and he couldn't deal with it anymore. So he said what he said. So I'm virtually saying now is that he talked himself into it. He wanted out of it. I think he just had enough, and he's mostly thinking he just wants to go home and not go back for a weekend, go back and be back there for a while so he can get his head together again and maybe find a club where he's actually got a say right the way through, and it is the best way of doing things. Success comes from that. We can look at City, and as much as the negatives we can say about everything, Pep has got a say in everything.
Yeah.
That's why there's been continuity in their performances and what they've gone and won. It's a proven point. We've suddenly seen clubs waning a little bit, wavering, everything going wrong with certain clubs. And we're starting to see that change in football, which is causing so many instabilities within football clubs. And then it goes down to the fact of the layers under teams as well is falling away. And that's why we're not getting the football that really everyone should be getting for what's being paid for and what's put in. So it's not an enjoy for me personally. It's me saying it. It's not an enjoyable time. The amount of football I watch a week over a season, and this moment in time, this is the first season where every time I'm going out, I've got no great drive to get to the train station and sit on a train to go to a game of football.
Yeah, sometimes you said that the trade-off for a lacking quality at the top is more entertainment, but it's just not felt like that this season. I don't think so anyway, but I'm with you on that. But yeah, I think United have got to be in a position where they've where they've got to get a manager. They've got to have someone who's like, yeah, this is my way. And all right, Ruben Amorim was trying to do that, but I think it was too much of a diversion. I don't think, like you said, I think they've looked at the numbers. They've looked at the fact he's a young manager. They've thought possibly they could mould him into like dynamic kind of modern setup, and it just hasn't worked. And I think that they've misunderstood what United is, and they've got to understand that before they make a permanent appointment next time. And it's a really big risk because now they've talked about this project 2028, which was a pie in the sky number associated with the 150th anniversary of the club and the fact that that's 15 years without a league title. But United, this season's been so poor that they could have been competing for this title, and that's even going in like from the start of going into this season with what they had. It's so dreadful, and United are not in a position to challenge the normal season because this isn't a good United team. I don't think they're the worst United team of all time, but Ruben Amorim had a point when he said that, and he never was able to turn that around or gain the confidence of the squad because it was such a nuclear option to take so early on, and you can only do that if you've got. And I'll be fair to what happened at that point because it was so early on that he was able to navigate through that at the back end of the summer when some people thought he should have gone after the Europa League final, and he was back through that, and United got through. So he's starting to look like he's their man. But he never oversaw any of that improvement. There was Ahmad possibly benefited from that positional change, but apart from that, there wasn't anyone else. I'm just going to come through. We've got a lot of comments coming in, as you might expect. Tony says Zidane or Emery. We'll talk about some managers in a bit. Giles says one positive that comes out of this has to be Kobbie Mainoo, one of the first names on the team sheet, hopefully. But it's still, I mean, as I said when Amorim came in, right. Everyone was saying Rashford should go. Everyone was saying that. And I think there was a couple of other players as well saying, it's time for them to go. But I said, look, a manager comes in. All right, he might move on some players that you might think are deadwood, but he's going to probably get rid of one of your favourites as well. That's what happens with big change. And I had to suck that up for a long time. Like, it's Kobbie Mainoo. I didn't like it, but I thought if it's for the betterment of the team and the club, then fair enough, because it's the direction that the club are going in. Back in the day when there'll be loads of supporters who listen to this or watch this, they'll be saying, like, when Fergie came in and he got rid of Whiteside and McGrath, two of the most individually gifted players the club have ever had, but the club went in the right direction, so you can't complain with that. There was never any evidence that was going to happen under Amorim. You just had to have faith, and that never did happen. So as much as I'd be like, all right, great to see Kobbie back in the team, of course, and to see him have his future at United, which is what I desperately wanted to see. I would have still been, if United were winning titles and winning trophies, then I wouldn't be complaining that Kobbie wasn't at the club, if you understand what I mean. Poser says, Happy New Year's, gents. Completely self-inflicted on Amorim's part. They indulged him and he spat out his dummy because he wasn't getting results in an ill-suited system. Best for everyone. A-Man says, morning, I feel for Amorim as he was brought in as a 3-4-3 manager, so what did Ineos expect? In truth, the results speak for themselves. He was lucky to survive the defeat in Bilbao. So said SACKED. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that. I'm reading your point now. Yeah, you're spot on. But as long as these gimmick owners are running our club like it's in administration, this ain't happening. So yeah, but we'll come to this point in a moment. They are, for all intents and purposes, they might as well be in administration. That's how badly the Europa League set them back. But we'll talk about that in a second. But Rory says, for me, what's gone against him is the reluctance to change, reluctance to give young players a chance, and his overall in-game management. It's been the worst I've ever seen in my lifetime. Vi Medium says, spot on, Paul. I really don't understand the way it's set up these days. Rory says, it's massive point, Paul. Metrics have improved this season, but it's never passed the eye test. Stats can easily be padded to make players appear better than they actually are, i.e. Dalot. The point I was making about Dalot yesterday is not going to go down as his error, but it was his loss of possession that's put Everton in a really bad position. And we've talked so often, how often, Paul, in the last 5 years, have we talked about an error from one player making another player look bad? And it just what happened yesterday. And I don't think the draw was a bad result, considering what we had out. I just, we're not even talking about that. We're talking about the impacts of what's happened after. Poser said, for what it's worth, I do think we have the nucleus of a good squad to build a title-winning squad in 2 years. Midfield and fullback needs investment. Considering his form and attitude since he joined, he had it coming. Wayne Paul, do you reckon Fletcher will go with a flat back 4 or play it safe for continuity? We'll go to that in a second. But yeah, I mean, Paul, talking about the point about where United are, we always knew that they'd be struggling from the Europa League final because we knew what an impact that was going to have not finishing in the top four itself was a bad one. We just sort of plodded towards the end of the season. It was really catastrophic, and the way that the Europa League final went, it was so poor. His selections in the final himself didn't really help. And you think then when, we talk about one game a week, he was talking about that. All these things that he was saying at the time appear to have been massive contradictions. And I get in the moment you say the thing that you think is going to be the thing that helps, like one game a week will help us adjust to the system. And it never did. We only looked a little bit more familiar in it, but it was like the Van Gaal era, when he started to look familiar, but it was boring. It was rubbish to watch. And the good moments came from the individuals rather than the product of the system. And there's a bit of a contradiction in there, because you could say the other way. You could say, well, that's the product of the manager. And I take on board that someone said that in the comments recently. But there was still never enough evidence that it was moving in the right way. And I think, given we still spent a lot of money in the summer, there were players that the manager wanted. There was some speculation that he wanted Ollie Watkins over Šeško. I don't think that's materialistically much different. We would have wanted the manager to have done more in this 6-month period, right, Paul? I think that's fair to say that if he was going to change the system or stick with the 3-man defence, you wanted to see more evidence of it actually going right. Some people might say, well, we're in top 6. We're not far away now as opposed to when he came in. But the point is made about the league, right? That's the fluctuation of the league rather than United having improved. Because, like I said earlier, it does feel like we've just done nothing for 14 months, and that's the biggest criticism. Is there anything that you've seen within this year, within this 14 months, that you're going to say this is a takeaway from Ruben Amorim? This is something that he contributed that was positive.
I can't really. I really wish something could come to my mind, and something might pop up, and I'll say, "Yeah, he done all right." Yeah, but at this moment, I can't think of anything. I'm thinking of his system he is playing, and I see what Crystal Palace do. And even though Crystal Palace are having not such a good run, you look at the way that Palace play, and I watched them again over this Christmas. I watched quite a few of their games, and Palace play it better. They have players who come in. They put Lamina goes in that back line. Carvel, he comes into that back three when players are out, and they look steady. They look in control. And I just look at it, is that it was just the wrong personnel he tried to do something with. He tried to play in a certain way that the players either didn't want to or they couldn't do it. And mobility is key. So you look at Harry Maguire and you go, no, not mobile enough. You look at Luke Shaw, not mobile, not flexible, no agility. Martinez comes back. He's looked the best player since he's come in. What incredible performances! Yesterday, Martinez for me looked the best player on the pitch. Every time he had the ball, he's come in. He's looked absolutely fantastic for someone who's been out of an injury like that, and that tells you something about his mentality as a player. He's Argentinian. You wouldn't expect much different. They're so strong mentally and everything. He seems more controlled now, temperament-wise, which is a good thing as well. So I don't know if that's come from him or the manager's helped him get through that little bit where his head used to kick when he used to let himself down, those moments. So I look at it as that it did need change, but I read something about the manager and about the way, and someone wrote a story on him and related it to Sir Alex with he didn't use the word philosophy. This is another new age thing they've brought in now to football. But forgetting that football is a working class game and the ordinary man just got a general idea, just turn around and say, this is the way the manager wants to play. That really spells it out easier, doesn't it? Rather than his philosophy.
So that was Van Gaal word, wasn't it? It brought that into the language. So.
But Sir Alex stuck with what he believed when he come in, and he done it, and he was stubborn, but he never got questioned about it. No one said anything, even through his back. No one said about it, and that's where we become now. And there's one person to throw something in, they keep going on and on and on, and they virtually tear down walls with it by just going on and on and on. And he believed in it, and he had good reason to, because he's had success out of it. he just didn't have the personnel and maybe the right players who were willing to give a little bit to get rewards back from giving a bit, and that's where it is. And maybe I look at it that could the system have worked better without a Bruno in the system? Because you look at them the way they've played without him, they're more controlled in midfield. Some of the passing in that midfield in areas was the best I've seen it in quite a while, because they was all in their little areas and they all knew what they was doing next. They had a way of moving around. They wasn't overrun. The whole temperament, the everything looked really good. People would come in and say, "Oh, but we was lacking, we was lacking improvisation, creativity." Well, it was just the final pass, to be honest. Dorgu, maybe 10 sloppy passes. Good balls given out to Dorgu, no pace. Couldn't get past his man, who wasn't the quickest either. There was a lot of things there that could have been better. So I'm just saying that when I've seen United play in a way that's controlled, it's been without him.
Yeah.
So the team can move on if it goes out and gets other players to come in. As always, Manchester United didn't go out and replace Brian Robson with another Brian Robson. When Roy Keane went, they didn't go and replace him with another Roy Keane. When David Beckham, another David Beckham. You don't go like for like. You find someone who's going to add something different, and all of a sudden, if it's right, everyone builds off the back of it. The team, and all of a sudden, the club, everything bounces off, and that's the way it works. So there's people out there who got in their head it's become like a love affair. So I'm thinking, I'm looking at it. Even yesterday, and you said it, Wayne, it was a good point against a side that have hit a high point without really being that good. But they're on a good run, Leeds, for them this season. Calvert-Lewin had scored goals, but Calvert-Lewin played like Calvert-Lewin yesterday.
Yeah.
Terrible. He had one header, and that was it. He should never really be a problem. So you can look at it and go to yourself, blimey. Which someone mentions going to 9-10 years for United to win a league. It's mad, really. You get January right, you could actually go in there and you can push to win the league this season.
Yeah,
that's how mad it is, Wayne. And I don't expect anyone to question that, because the league is that poor. The levels are that poor. And if we're talking about Arsenal going to win the league, then it's going to be an ugly league if they win it. To be perfectly honest, that's where it is at this moment in time. They're not outstanding as what Liverpool were last season, where you just knew that Liverpool were going to win everything in front of them until such time they won it too early and they just took their foot off the gas, which tells you the reason why they are where they are now. That tells you where the man management was until the end. Because if that was a Sir Alex, even 2 games from home, he was having nothing of it. You couldn't go and party about the moment until such time you could.
There was I remember 93-94 season when you were building up that lead and he was going on at you in probably the autumn, beat Spurs, beat Swindon, and they were comfortable wins, and he was like too complacent. And I mean, it's all with the Galatasaray win, but I mean, he was still saying that all the way through, regardless. I think it's 12 points by Christmas or something, the lead, but he was like, no. Yeah, just what do you think of the last couple of games? Because he moved back to the 3-man defense against Wolves, and his in-game substitutions seem to be poor. And we've talked earlier about him, the way that he's handled the squad a bit too reactively, like he wasn't preparing for he was saying, I've got the quote here, he said, it was bad luck to lose Ahmad Bryan to the AFCON and then with Bruno, but it wasn't bad luck. You knew, and it was planned for, and you didn't, even though we were out of the Carabao Cup, he still had all those months to integrate players into the squad, and he never you know what I mean? He never did that, and then he was left with the position that he did. He put Dogu on the right, who played all right in the couple of games that he was there until he moved him back to the left again against Wolves, I think. And then we regressed so much. We looked so bad against Wolves. That one for me, and I know we didn't lose, and we even said, predicting this, we said, don't rule out Wolves getting a result at Old Trafford, because we knew what was going to happen. That was a big one for him, because he needed to build on he wasn't great against Newcastle or in the other games, but the change of shape had a proper change in the way that we were more inventive, or at least we looked, I'm going to say we moved up to looking like a 6 out of 10 rather than a 3 out of 10. We looked like we might do something. And he moved back to his formation, and we moved backwards in terms of the way that we were playing. That was a bad move for him, wasn't it?
Yeah, it just seems like he just, he goes, oh, yeah, we got that, but great, but we're going back to what I believe I know best. That's what he's gone and done. And the position he was in, he couldn't do that. He hadn't earned the right to really go and do that, in the sense of with the fans as well, to believe that it was going to happen. And he just proved it, because straight away, I think the players showed it a little bit as well by the performance. They weren't comfortable. They weren't happy about it. The only thing that's come out of it is come to mind now, and I said it early on. I said it quite a while ago, and I started it because of that individual. Is that Aidan Heaven has come out of it really well. The lad needed games. He needed someone to believe in him, to play him regularly, because he was playing well, and he's got that. And he has definitely stepped forward. The free, he done well in the free. He's played in the middle of the free. You could see a few times. There was one time during the game yesterday, him and Martinez, he went for the same ball as Martinez, and it was well out of his jurisdiction, and they went straight through the middle leads in the first half. Yeah. And sorry, was it second half? And he got away with it. Because he tried to do too much, and that's about being overconfident and believing you're indestructible because everything's going well. I'm not going to make a mistake, which is not a bad way to be, but that's when you shouldn't let your emotions get to you. But he's allowed him to get games in.
And he's on the right as well, on the right of the middle.
He can play the right. He played the right, and he's better than Euro.
Yeah.
You've got more trust in him, and he's braver with the ball than Euro as well. And he's willing to hit it with either foot as well, which is a big thing for him as well. So there was a positive that's come out of the last few weeks, to be perfectly honest, with a young player. And you mentioned earlier that he hadn't been playing people pre the African Cup of Nations, and you are right. Why didn't he do it? Common sense said to do it, and I wonder, was he asking to and he wasn't allowed to, or was he saying that those players and he did say it, those players aren't good enough? And to be perfectly honest, I would like to see Lacey. I'd like to have seen him come on yesterday and take off Dorgu.
Yeah.
Just to bring on someone who naturally can play that position, scores goals, makes goals from there, got a bit of pace about him. But when I look at Fletcher, Darren's boy, and he's not ready for it.
Yeah.
Miles away from it, absolutely miles away from it. And I don't know, neither of them. So I think we have to look at it and say, maybe that needs to be looked at, what's happening there with the younger players. Are they, you want to talk about them, and the club has lived and breathed regarding young players, but sometimes you have to say that the conveyor belt has stopped, because every club now wants to talk about these super kids they got, none more so than Arsenal. But in theory, how good are they really in comparison to what they were yesteryear when they were brought up as men, and when they come into the team, they were men already.
Yeah, Arsenal have always been that way, overhyping players from the academy. It's gone on for 20 years since Wenger was there. He was revolutionising the academy, and Fergie, was apparently betraying the youth. Funny comment here from Box. Good morning, mate. Says, if we don't see a Tyler and Jack Fletcher pivot starting against Burnley with Jack as captain, what's it all been for? Well, yeah, you would if you were Darren, right? I don't know. Dar says formation wrong, lineups wrong, substitutions wrong, goodbye, wrong manager, coach, or whatever. Here's just on that point there. Lacey has deserved a chance in so many games. Rory says we'll never know if he has potential as a first team player unless he's thrown into a situation like Wolves or Everton, where we're chasing a win. I think he commented on that as well, didn't he? About giving them, putting them in pressure. Chris, journalist, checking in, good lad, Chris. He says Emery isn't a good enough figurehead. In response to Tony's comment earlier, at a club under such a microscope, technically he's excellent, but PSG and Arsenal are a big red flag. Yeah, I mean the way that he was treated at Arsenal by Arsenal, but also by the press was disgraceful, and he'd be under that exact same kind of thing. It's weird. He's been absolutely loved, and rightly so, for what he did at Villa, for what he's done at Villa. And he wasn't a bad manager at Arsenal, but the criticism that he get under for personality and stuff like that. And Amorim hasn't been free of that either. Before we move on from Amorim and we talk about what comes next, just a very quick one, Paul. He said it was the worst Manchester United team of all time when he first took over. You know, after a few weeks, that's what he said. A few results. And there's not a lot to write home about. There's the win at City that came very early on. We won at Anfield under his reign. But really, and there's a game against Lyon where we got to the Europa League final, which wasn't really by design as such. It was just like a gamble at the end, and Old Trafford doing what Old Trafford does. And you know me, I'm not on here to post for us to be making controversial statements, but I think it's probably worth asking the question in terms of serious conversation and serious debate. The comment that's been associated with him in the last few weeks is that he's the worst United manager, let's say, since the war. People saying of all time that people don't understand what happened before the war, so let's not go there. Since the war, so we're talking O'Farrell, Wilf McGuinness, Ten Hag, these kind of low points that we've had. Even McGuinness, I don't think you could say it's a low point compared to this. Would you say he's the worst that the club have
had? Personality-wise, I would say no. He's got something about him which I'd liked.
Yeah.
When you look at results, you look at performances. It's a battle between him and Ten Hag, isn't it? Really, and the aftermath of Ten Hag and what you hear, what I heard, what had gone on, what he'd gone, and some of the things he's gone and done. I'm still sticking with Ten Hag.
In spite of the trophies, the fact that he's won 2.
Yeah. It's just everything that he'd done, some of the things he'd done surrounding the club. Yeah, what he took away with him. Yeah.
I think that might be fair. We put us in a lot of trouble. Would you sacrifice those trophy wins for United to be able to operate properly in the transfer market now instead of under the noose of the Anthony Casemiro and other transfers like that? Vi Medium, it says Dave Sexton needs to be on the list. Yeah, I know, but yeah, he does. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. We're considering the lowest of the low, aren't we? And Sexton, some of the football was reportedly dreadful, and from all my study of it and all the games that I've watched under his period of time in charge, yeah, not particularly great. And the point I was making out earlier about Amorim with the Lyon game, and I said it on the podcast last week, is that you've got certain games in charge where the club almost shows its own muscle memory and reacts in a way like Lyon, Old Trafford. Sexton's best game at United was objectively the 5-2 win over Porto, where United had to sort of play against the way that he wanted to play. Same as under Mourinho and under Van Gaal. There's games that just weren't designed by those managers that went down as their greatest games because of the way that United are as a club. That's my belief anyway. Bill says, Bill Meister, I don't know if that's your name. Well, Bill Meister definitely isn't, but Bill might be. So I think the issue with Amorim is some of the things he publicly said wasn't good for the players. So behind closed doors, they aren't up to it. But coming out and saying the worst team ever was poor. Yeah. So let's come to this. Tony saying Cobby was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was left a bad taste for me, that one. But like I said earlier, if the manager's right, it doesn't really matter. I'm on board with the manager and the club, but he wasn't, and he's gone. So So this one earlier, Bill saying issue is now who do we get? Who's actually out there? He says I guarantee it'll be Glasner or Iriola, as their contracts are running down. Glasner obviously plays the same kind of formation, although you said earlier in the season quite rightly that it's a very different way of operating that 3-4-3. I can't see United sticking with that. I think that's been a big sticking point, and that would seem to me like the only issue, the only way of bringing him in. I can't see. I feel like Palace have stagnated a little, and I think where he was at the start of the season, his stock's not quite so high. I think it'd be too much of a gamble for me. In the short term, though, Paul, I mean, before we talk about the long term, we'll talk about short term appointments first. Fletcher's obviously going to take over against Wednesday, and then view with against Burnley on Wednesday, and then the longer term view is going to be taken over who comes in as the interim for the end of the season. People are going to come at me. I just think Ollie seems like the stable choice to me. He stabilised the club earlier, and all right, when we talked about it, the big mistake was giving him the contract that early on, because the results had already started to turn by that point on the performances. But I just think I get the theory is that Fletcher does what Ollie did, or Carrick, as Rory's saying here, bring Carrick in because he was caretaker last time. Well, not last time. It was caretaker when Ten Hag was sacked before Ragnick came, and I know Rude was caretaker before. I just think Ollie's got a decent track record of stabilising the club in that situation, and you're kind of hoping that Fletcher does it again. And like my choice, I would say Ollie, but I feel in this situation they'll go with Fletcher because he's part of that existing setup. So it's kind of like they'll all be telling him what to do anyway. Am I being too cynical with that? Do you reckon that'll be the setup for the rest of the season?
If they bring Darren Fletcher in, a lot of the fans will go, "Oh, great, because it's Darren Fletcher." And the old saying is, he knows the club. How many times you hear that is absolutely incredible. But it's about the players. Yeah. And the players, we don't know the players' relationship with someone like Darren Fletcher. We don't know how was he foreseen by them internally. Was he seen as being one of them in the way that he conducted himself? Was he meeting and greeting them? Was he chatting with them, conversing? Or was he sitting on the peripheral and shaking hands and nodding heads with the powers above the manager? So we don't know about that. For Ollie to come in, I think people again will get even more sentimental regarding him. I think that would be the issue, and you wonder what's going to happen if he was to get a few performances and a few wins, and everyone suddenly jumps off the back of that and get him back and should never let him go before. So I think it's one that they can't just hang it out to the end of the season. I think they've got Darren Fletcher. They must have someone in their head already what they want to do. But if they allow one person or Darren Fletcher to do it to the end of the season, and they manage to get European football, it wouldn't surprise me. And obviously he ticks the boxes because he's agreeing to everything that they say and he's saying the right things, that they'll give him a job, because he's not going to say anything against the business that runs that portion of the football club. So that's how, for me, how it works. That's the whole thing, where before it was manager, chairman.
Yeah.
And that was it. That's all gone now. So it's all about nodding heads, shaking the right hands, which isn't the greatest way, in my opinion, to earn a job, to keep a job, but it's the way that it's become nowadays, to be perfectly honest. So with Darren, I don't know. You see him sitting up there all the time. Was he mixing in with the players? Was he joining in? Is it right for him to do it now his sons are involved? Yeah. Now in today's world, people will come out and say, "Oh yeah, but Sir Alex had his son Darren now." Let's put it this way: the gaffer loved Eric more than his own son. So that's how it was. That's what it was. Even Darren knew that as well. So there's a big difference with what you're talking here. So it doesn't seem right to me, to be perfectly honest. Again, I'm just reading what you're seeing there, Wayne. It doesn't matter to me about what he done, all those goals and whatever. football has changed even from when Ollie left the club. Football has changed immensely. The football's changed now, and what's happening off the field and how you're managed as well as a manager, as a coach, I should say. And we've seen it, and with everybody you speak to, majority of football fans now, I think a lot of them are getting fed up with what they're having to watch. There's one team, I think, in the Premier League that virtually keep you entertained almost week in, week out, and that's Sunderland.
At the moment, yeah.
At the moment, that's Sunderland. They're the ones who are people are looking forward to see them play. I've seen them twice this season. I haven't been disappointed. So, no, there's something going on in football at the moment which isn't right. You're governed by laptops. So it's going to be, Darren's got to get in there, and hopefully he's got a good relationship with those players. But I'm quite sure he'll be looking there. Once he gets in there, and if he's doing well, he's going to want the job. And it's easy for them to go down that road if they've got someone there who's willing to listen.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think that's my concern, is that we still need the evidence that Ineos are making the right decisions. As much as we're saying this about the manager, we can all see the evidence of that, but they did appoint him, and they supported and took up this massive change of direction. I feel kind of lucky or kind of vindicated by the fact that I brought a book out. I finished writing a book about the philosophy of United the week that Amorim was appointed, and it was such a diversion from what we were that I was thinking, God, this could turn out to make a right mockery of everything that I've written, saying that United have got such an established way of being. But not thankfully for the book, not thankfully for me. I would have loved to have been proven wrong, so I'm still a supporter of the club and all that. But I mean, everything that's happened since just supports what I wrote, that there is certain things in there that you can't mess around with, and that's what United tried to do over the last sort of 12 to 13 months. It is try to re-establish a certain way of being, where you've got to respect where you are and where you came from, and that's certainly. I mean, I know what you're saying about just because you know the club doesn't mean you're going to be a guaranteed success there. Knowing the club in this environment is a very different thing to knowing what the club's supposed to stand for at the moment, historically as well. So there's that with Fletcher. Mal says there, the comment that Paul was referring to is that Ole had the 2 highest scoring seasons for United in the last 18 years. Since 2008, scored much more than any post-Sir Alex manager, and goals conceded was decent. Finished 3rd, 2nd, 4 semi-finals and a final. Very much like a Wilf McGuinness era, and that's what we were saying. I mean, if you remember, if you're a long-time listener, Mal, or anyone else who was listening, Paul and I massively backed Ollie all the way through. It was just the end part, which is just critical. We never wanted to see that change. But you also made a couple of comments on Twitter, Mal. I'm just going to come to them very quickly. He said press conferences, that running the team down as a whole, where he said United were the worst team ever, or the players such as Rashford, Garnacho, Mainu and Højlund. He didn't get the best out of players or inspire. The tactics were dire, and his reluctance to change. And then you also made a comment about O'Farrell and McGuinness having better runs. O'Farrell's an argument of being worse because he brought the club to near relegation, although we did have better runs overall. Yeah, we played some good football under O'Farrell. We ought to say that in these early weeks. Best played some incredible football. In fact, a lot of the great goals that you see of George Best, the goal he scored against West Ham, the goal he scored against Sheffield United, those were scored under the O'Farrell reign. And Brian Smith says, this says more about Ineos than Amorim, which is kind of what we're saying here. Rinse and repeat every 2 years with managers. We're a shambles. That's what Paul was saying about becoming the new Chelsea. And Mal, finally, their performances and results are key, and Amorim didn't deliver. His comments on United lowered expectations. I wish Darren luck. Yeah, so let's talk about permanent successes. If Dave was sat with us, he'd probably still be banging the Carlo Ancelotti drum. 66 years old, manager of Brazil at the moment. I would be tempted to say, I haven't seen any speculation. I've seen the comment here from Tony saying Zidane. I'm not saying that I think Ancelotti will be appointed. I definitely don't. I think he's probably the best option out there, and I think you need a personality coming in. I just can't see someone who's achieved so much and has a certain way of being coming into this kind of operation. I can't see it happening. So I do feel that permanently they'll be hoping that Fletcher hits the ground running with some good results and performances, gets that contract. It's a very cheap option. United need to be pragmatic at the moment. What do you think about a permanent successor?
Well, I wouldn't go down with Ancelotti. I wouldn't go down that road at all. There was a reason why he come away for Real Madrid, or Real Madrid wanted to see him go, because they wanted change. They've changed their whole way of things now, and that's why the players are unhappy as well about the way he's come in and managed it now, Alonso, because this is how he's been told to do it. The Ancelotti way was sit back, have a sunbed, do this, socialise, but don't let me down in games. That's how it was in certain ways. And that's how it was in certain ways. But you could do that with those kind of players that he come through, because the players, just all it was for them was that game was that important. They knew whatever happened, they'll get the white handkerchief at worst, at the best, and the rest of it could be don't walk down the street alone, because results matter for that football club. And he got the best out of them. Now we're seeing the same players moaning now because of they mostly have to stay in the afternoons, even though they got like virtually a hotel at their training ground. They have to do a little bit more, and they're not enjoying it as what it was. Ancelotti weren't going to change his ways. He had his own ideas how to manage players and to be this and that. As long as the players, when it mattered, did their jobs in training and in games. So is he going to want to change from where he was in Spain, and then now he's managing Brazil? We can shoot across to Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, or does he want to come back to the Northwest again after being at Everton? I very much doubt that with Ancelotti. So when you talk about it, it does look like a Glasner, who's been very successful in what he's done with teams, or is it Iola at Bournemouth, who's finding it very difficult at the moment as he gets things going. He's got to keep losing players, and in the end, it must do his head in, thinking he wants to maybe be in a better position to actually to go and try to really win something rather than hoping to snatch something with a decent cup run. So they're the two you'd look at. Emery, the message earlier said about what happened at PSG. Everyone had problems at PSG. To be perfectly honest, doesn't matter who you are. I look at Arsenal. Arsenal was still living in a Wenger world and what Wenger left them behind, and they didn't appreciate or respect Wenger. The media then decided they wanted to take the mickey out of someone because of the way they spoke, because they're Spanish. They went down that road that he can't even speak English. Funny thing to be saying, and what's happening in his country at this moment in time. I think he's gone and proved himself at a big old traditional, well-run, well-respected club in his country.
Yeah.
Would he turn it down? No, because he's mostly learnt more now. He's been in the country a long time and he knows better now. So could he go, and would he like the opportunity to manage Manchester United? Of course he would, because you watch him on the touchline. He's desperate to win things. He's desperate to be up there with a right to be there, with a club that has got the DNA to go and do it on a consistent basis. And what he's doing with Villa is incredible as well, because virtually the Villa players, they want to play every single game. He hasn't got players going lame on him all the time. Those players want to play. That's the difference. They might have something, but they want to play regardless. So he's not about, he is a very good shout. If you talk, they're the three at this moment in time, if you're talking managers from this league. Someone will say you can't go outside because they don't know the league, they don't know English football. Load of rubbish. I hate when people say that, because about just being a man. Too many managers have come into this league and gone on one thing straight away.
About Luis Enrique, would he? Am I just saying names that are too big?
Luis Enrique is another one. He's a bit like a Pep in a certain way. Preparation would be important for him. Would he come in cold now? No chance. He would come in at the start of the season, but then there'd be the preparation before he comes in to know what players he's going to have to work with. He's not going to want to work from scratch of what he's got there, because they can't play the efficient football that he wants. They've got no legs. So he'd want to start from scratch with a more pacey team. So 80% of that first team squad would have to go for Luis Enrique to take over.
Yeah. No, yeah. And like the comment says there, and Malak said Luis Enrique would never leave PSG.
Why? Why wouldn't he?
I just think where United are at the moment, and the fact that he can still get a guarantee of success, that he knows the intensity of the. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I'm mentioning it because I'm thinking I don't know where. None of the names that you mention thrill me. That I don't see. I can understand that you're not transporting in a Luis Enrique or Carlo Ancelotti just because I'm mentioning the two biggest names I can think of that theoretically would move, and I can understand that they wouldn't, and I can understand they wouldn't. This operation, the way that Ineos run, they wouldn't want those kind of managers in. So what happens after? You say the obvious point that always clicks in my head is, where's the next Sir Alex then? Where's the next manager who's doing something, who's massively overachieving at a club where you're not expecting to? And you mentioned a club there, Glasner at Palace, but he's stuck to this formation, and we've already seen the evidence that it doesn't work at United. There needs to be a change for that.
Yeah, but Wayne, did he go into Palace and he looked at that team, those players, he's seen them before, he took the job and says, this team is more suited to the players they've got?
Perhaps, then, yeah.
Because be honest, I saw Frankfurt play 2 seasons ago when they was in the against West Ham in the Europa League. I saw them 3 seasons ago, and I'm sure they played a 4.
Yeah.
I'm sure virtually 4, but you got to remember these European sides are more adaptable in certain ways, and a lot of the English sides is that they'll go from a 3 to a 4. You know, they flip about more fluid in the way they change positions than what a lot of English sides are. So is he gonna demand that? I don't know, but you've seen already what he's like. He speaks his mind. If he's not happy with something, he says it. And we're in this world again, and I will say virtually what I said before. The next person who comes into Manchester United has to accept that he's not going to be a manager. And that's what we've seen at Chelsea, and we've seen it in football. So it's about how far are you allowed to rule your roost? What can you say? What can you ask for that ain't going to offend anybody? You know, when things ain't going right and everyone is blatantly seeing what the problem is, can you actually reiterate the points that you've been saying, which now everyone else is saying already, where the weaknesses are? And you're saying as a manager, you need help to sort those problems. Is that going to get you the sack by saying the truth to the people who are running the football, the most important thing in a football club? Or is the football club not really a football club anymore? It's just an investment in something that's trying to go bigger, and then suddenly just become something global without being successful.
Yeah. I mean, United feels like we've been stuck between that since Ed Woodward was in position as chief exec. It's just, I'd like I said earlier, there's nothing that thrills me that's out there, and that doesn't mean that I can't see the sense in the change. People will remember, if you've got long enough memories, who've stuck around with these podcasts, that was my concern when Ollie was sacked. You know, I sort of bought into what we were doing with Ten Hag, but I'm sort of with you, Paul, that the more I hear about what happened under his tenure, the more I'm concerned about how much it set back United back. I wasn't, I could see why we had to move on from him, but again, I wasn't utterly convinced with Amorim, and I think we're in that position again. The only sort of consistent point is that you've felt like you've reached a point of no return with what we had, and it's just a lack of conviction I've got in the. It was mentioned here from. We don't have enough time to get into this today, but we will next week. Bill saying, can we discuss whether or not we think Jason Wilcox is established enough to be in the role he is with the power he has? He's technical director, so how we play sits with him too. No, it absolutely does. And Paul, I mean, you played against him enough times, didn't you? So, did you ever have any conversations running down that wing saying that, Jason, if you be a director of football for United one day, Please don't lose
Well,
for 3 months.
that's the funny thing about it. You were just amazing how you played against someone regularly when you find them in this powerful position, and one of the biggest clubs in the world. It's absolutely amazing. And then you got to remember that he was in a position not that role, but he was working for the club just down the road.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, does it normally happen? Does someone from Barcelona walk into Real Madrid in a higher position than what they were when they was at Barcelona? So I find it a bit strange. It seems like he's the one who's taken offence to it. And as it mentioned at the top of it, the manager was chosen by him and the other bloke from Man City. So they should be held accountable as well. But it seems like these technical directors, or whatever you want to call them, their director of football, are never accountable. They move around as much, maybe slightly more than managers. Clubs need to go and get them left, right, and centre. They seem to pop in. I don't know where exactly the jobs come from. It's a European job. It was used outside of our shores and that's how it works. But I just wonder if it. Well, there's a lot I'd love to say about it, but I wouldn't want to at this moment in time because it's like conspiracy theories, I think, really. But I don't like the concept of it really for what it's doing to football, because it's taking money away from football and it's not allowing football to grow. It's not allowing players to grow. The wrong kind of players are being chosen, given the opportunity to play professional footballers. The most natural footballers are not given the opportunities now.
Conversation for a completely different time. This conversation all morning has been about Ruben Amorim sacked as manager of Manchester United. Would you believe it? On this day, 80 years ago, Paul, I know you weren't around then, missed you by a few years. On this day, 80 years ago, Matt Busby took charge of his first ever match at Manchester United, a draw at Accrington Stanley in the FA Cup. Bill Foulkes was born on this day in 1932. And now we've got another big momentous occasion. I actually wrote down in a tweet earlier on, because I had a sneaky feeling that something was going to happen. And let me, 29th of December, 19th December, 4th of July, 30th of April, 5th of November, 22nd of April, 23rd of May, 18th of December, 21st of November, 28th of October, 5th of January. If I sound like I'm Rain Man just saying random dates, those are the dates of every Manchester United manager who's been sacked post Sir Matt Busby. So the 1st January sacking. Well done, Ruben Amorim, for achieving your own piece of history. Because there's not a lot else to write about from your reign in charge of Manchester United. I'll read the statement again before we depart. Ruben Amorim has departed his role as head coach of Manchester United. Ruben was appointed in November 2024 and led the team to a UEFA Europa League final in Bilbao in May. With Manchester United sitting 6th in the Premier League, the club's leadership has reluctantly made the decision that it is the right time to make a change. This will give the team the best opportunity of the highest possible Premier League finish. The club would like to thank Ruben for his contribution to the club and wishes him well for the future. Darren Fletcher will take charge of the team against Burnley on Wednesday. And we'll be back next week to talk about the game against Burnley and the game against Brighton, and hopefully some more actual news to talk about with regards to successor to Ruben. All that's left for me to say is, it wasn't great. Some of the worst football that we've seen, but thanks Ruben for Lyon. Thanks for the win at City. Thanks for the win at Liverpool. Thanks for always being honest. You seem like a really nice guy. The job seemed like it was too big for you in the end. And once again, Manchester United are on the merry-go-round, and we'll be here to talk about it next week. Have a good one, guys.